Hi everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're diving into 3 stories that took place in the Appalachian Mountains. From creeps literally living inside walls, to what might be feral people lurking out there. We've got a little bit of everything. If you make it to the end, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on the last story. I've never been one to fully buy into the whole feral people theory, but man, this one is seriously unsettling. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching and commenting on the videos. Sorry I haven't been as active in the comments lately. Work's been crazy, and I just haven't had the time. But hopefully, that'll be changing soon. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. I have a friend who owns a lake house in the Appalachians. It's in a fairly remote area, but still accessible by car. So even though the closest neighbor is way too far to hear you scream if anything happens, it's not like we were completely cut off from the world either. Even though the place belongs to them, it's more of a vacation home, one they only use every now and then. So when they went to Europe for a long trip, they offered me the key. I'd been trying to impress my new girlfriend for a while, and the lake house seemed like the perfect way to do it. A romantic getaway, just the 2 of us, totally alone for a week. I also had a lot of stress piling up in every other part of my life, so that trip felt like the perfect excuse to relax for a bit. The house was absolutely stunning. I'd seen it once before, years ago, at a party they hosted, but I had no idea how beautiful it really was. Every little detail felt elegant and carefully designed. Elsa was completely charmed. I was happy things were starting off just right, or at least, that's what I thought at the time. James, my buddy who owns the house, had sent me a detailed video walking me through every lock in the place, showing which key on the keychain opened which door. The house might look modern from the outside, but the structure itself is old, and all the locks were different. Even though Elsa and I were both thrilled to be there, something felt off. We felt it from the start, especially me. I've always had this instinct, this sharp sense for danger. I grew up in a rough neighborhood and my stepfather was a cruel man. So I learned early on how to recognize the kind of situations I didn't want to get into. More than just recognizing them, I learned how to act on that instinct, how to stay sharp and alert. So when we first arrived and I felt a little uneasy, I didn't brush it off. I paid attention, stayed on edge. But honestly, there wasn't anything concrete to be worried about yet. So I tried to relax. That morning we unpacked and settled into the house. And in the afternoon we spent some time by the lake, soaking in the peace. Overall, it had been close to a perfect day. I was happy. But later that night, I just couldn't sleep. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the AC didn't seem to be working right. I left Elsa asleep in bed and went downstairs. I've always liked walking around at night. And that house, big and unfamiliar, felt like just the kind of space I wanted to wander through. The downstairs was much cooler than the bedroom upstairs, so I sat on the couch, enjoying the quiet. But the second I sat down, I heard the floor creak, right next to me, like someone had stepped on it. I froze, called out Elsa's name, thinking maybe she'd gotten up and followed me down. No answer. I got up to check it out. The sound had come from the kitchen, but no one was there, or at least no one I could see. I went straight to check the front door to make sure it was locked. But the second I reached it, I felt ridiculous. That house had a dozen other entry points besides the front. Windows, side doors, maybe even basement access. I didn't even know where all of them were. That thought made me feel incredibly exposed. So I started checking room by room. I know it might sound like I was overreacting, but there's a specific kind of moment that's hard to explain, when you just know you're not alone, even if you don't have any real proof. It took me over an hour and a half to go through everything, but in the end, I felt confident the house was locked up tight. I finally went back to bed around 3:30 in the morning. That night, I had the strangest dream. I dreamed someone was inside the house with us, standing in our room, just watching us sleep. I woke up with Elsa shaking me, asking if I was okay. It was still dark outside, so I just told her I'd had a bad dream. The next morning, we got up around 9:30, and I couldn't help but bring it up. I told her how real it had felt. Too real. She got goosebumps and said she'd felt something strange too, like we were being watched from the moment we got there. I didn't tell her what I'd felt. Didn't want to make it worse. I figured if I said it out loud, it would make everything real, and I didn't want to ruin our vacation. But I made a mental note to double-check everything again before bed that night. By mid-afternoon, I was way more relaxed. The tension had started to fade. I was still in my wet swim trunks and sitting in the shade, so I decided to head back to the house to grab a dry pair. That's when, for just a second, I thought I saw someone watching us from one of the upstairs windows. I took off running toward the house, straight to the room with that window. But when I got there, it was completely empty. That's when I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I doubted myself. I started wondering if the isolation and being alone with Elsa in the woods were messing with my head. Maybe the stress of wanting everything to be perfect, mixed with how remote the place was making me see and feel things that weren't really there. Still, I checked the whole upstairs, just to be sure. That night, after dinner, we were sitting in the front yard looking out over the lake, when I saw a faint light flicker from deep inside the woods. That was it. Too many coincidences. I knew someone was out there watching us. The second I stood up, a man rose from the trees and bolted into the forest. I chased him for a bit, but he was way faster and clearly knew the area better. Off in the distance, I could hear Elsa panicking and calling my name, so I gave up and ran back. We locked ourselves inside the house and called the cops, told them someone had been watching us and that I had a strong feeling he'd been inside the house too. They came out, but didn't seem overly concerned. Took a quick look around. Said they'd leave a patrol car outside overnight just in case, but that's all they could really do. I called James to let him know what had happened, and that's when he told me something that chilled me. Last time he and his wife stayed there, about 4 months back, he'd had the same feeling, like they were being watched. Said he kept waking up in the middle of the night with this heavy, unshakable sense that someone else was in the room with them. That made me think of my dream, and I knew that man had already been inside the house. He'd been in our room, watching us while we slept. I didn't tell Elsa. I didn't want to scare her, especially with the cops outside now, but I couldn't sleep. Around 4 a.m., I got out of bed to check if the patrol car was still there. So I stepped into the hallway to go to the next room. Right as I was about to enter, I saw a pair of legs hanging down from the ceiling at the end of the hallway. I froze and let out this involuntary yell. Seconds later, Elsa was next to me asking what was wrong, and the police were already in the house. Turns out the legs were someone climbing up into the attic. We had no idea there even was an attic. The hatch was practically invisible, but still, once you know it's there, it's obvious. The cops searched the attic, and what they found was horrifying. There was no one up there anymore, but there were clear signs someone had been living there. Dirty clothes everywhere, including ours. There were pictures of us swimming, eating, and sleeping. Not just pictures of us. Even photos of people I didn't recognize, some of them clearly years old. Whoever this guy was, he'd been living in that house for years. He used the walls to move around. There was a massive hole in the attic wall that connected to the lower parts of the house. That's how he'd been getting in and out without anyone noticing. He lived inside the walls. James was obviously shaken. He flew back to the States as fast as he could. He told me he hadn't mentioned the attic because he'd only ever been up there once as a kid. It had been completely forgotten over the years. It's been 8 years since all that happened, and the police never found anything else. We still don't know who that man was or why he was collecting our clothes and pictures, and I'm not sure I want to know. What I'm about to share with you is something that's been happening ever since I was a kid. Every time I visited my grandparents out in West Virginia. But I've only decided to talk about it now because something happened about a month ago that genuinely shook me to the core. This time it didn't feel strange or weird anymore. It felt wrong, dangerous, and very real. I live in Denver now with my parents. My dad's side of the family's all from there. But my mom grew up in West Virginia, spent most of her life there, and her parents, my grandparents, still live in the same damn house deep in the woods. When I was a kid, I loved visiting them, even though my mom never liked the idea. She always said they were way too relaxed about the woods and just let me run around unsupervised, like they didn't realize how risky that could be out there. My mom still tells this story from when I was little, how I was outside playing with my grandpa, and he took his eyes off me for literally a second, and when he turned back, I was already halfway into the woods, walking straight toward a voice I thought I recognized. I don't remember it clearly, just flashes. They totally freaked out, and ever since, they've been way more cautious whenever I visit. And honestly, weird things have always happened out there, but nothing like this year. Let me give you some context on why I even went down there this summer. My grandfather fell down the stairs and broke his hip and leg. And even though my grandma is still mentally sharp, she's not strong like she used to be. She gets tired fast, and you can tell she's struggling to take care of both of them. I just finished college, and I'm on a gap year, picking up random jobs here and there. Nothing serious. So I had time, and it felt right to go help. I brought my dog Timothy with me, which, yeah, I know, weird-ass name for a dog. But trust me, if you saw his face, you'd get it. The name just fits. I thought he'd love it there. Big yard, edge of the forest, plenty of space to explore. But he was off from the minute we got there. Head down, tail tucked, like he was trying to make himself invisible. I figured maybe it was just the new environment. I told him we'd go for a long walk once I settled in, try to shake that weird energy off him. My grandparents' place is this massive old house literally in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where the gravel road feels like it hasn't been maintained since the 70s. In the winter, it's basically inaccessible without a truck. In summer, it's easier, but still feels like you're driving straight into the past. While I was on that road, I kept thinking about all the things my mom used to say about the Appalachians. How you sometimes see people who aren't really there, hear voices that sound familiar, except no one's actually around. How you're never supposed to answer when someone calls your name from the woods. A whole list of creepy little rules she drilled into me every time I visited. I always thought she was just superstitious. One time I even got so pissed off I called her small-minded. I was young and cocky, and like most kids, I thought I knew everything. When I finally pulled up to the house, I took this deep breath and felt the air hit different. It's eerie out there, sure. The forest always had this heavy silence, and the isolation is no joke. But it's also beautiful in this raw, untouched kind of way. Clean air, no traffic sounds, no lights, just stillness. My grandma looked way more frail than I remembered. And my grandpa, man, he was in rough shape, could barely move, stuck in bed with a busted hip and leg. I started getting everything ready to help out. Groceries, meds, meals, the usual. And that's when I noticed Timothy. He wouldn't move much, barely touched his food, just followed me around slowly, looking over his shoulder like something might be behind him. He wasn't that cheerful, goofy dog I was used to. He felt more like a ghost of who he used to be. That evening, I told myself we'd go for that walk like I promised. But as I was grabbing the leash, my grandma gave me this look. Deep eye contact, full of something between fear and guilt. She told me to be careful, said it wasn't a good time to be out walking, that she knew those woods better than anyone and still didn't trust them. I promised I'd stay close. Then I stepped outside. It was still warm, humid even, but the second the sun started going down, the whole place changed. The air felt heavier, like it was sinking into my skin. Fog rolled in from the trees so fast it felt unnatural. And I know it probably sounds like a bunch of cliches, but I swear on everything. This is as real as it gets. And anyone who's from around here knows exactly what I'm talking about. Out here, day and night, might as well be two different worlds. Timothy stayed next to me but moved so slow, like each step took convincing. I talked to him, tried to keep it casual, but he was still stiff as a board, tail down, ears flat. Then he stopped, just froze. His head turned slowly toward the tree line where the fog was thickest. I looked too, and there it was, the silhouette of a person, just standing there, like they'd been watching us the whole time. It looked like a woman, but I couldn't be sure. Everything about it made my body lock up. I glanced down at Timothy. He was tense. Every muscle tight. The hair along his spine standing up straight like nails. I looked back, and she was gone. Just like that. I blinked, and the spot was empty again. I had no idea if it was even real or not. It happened so fast, like in the blink of an eye. But I sure as hell wasn't going to stick around to find out. So I turned around and told Timothy we were getting the hell out of there. But then I heard it. A sound I still can't describe. Not screaming, not crying. Just this murmuring, low and slow, like a woman whispering right behind me. Except there was no one there. I spun around, trying to see if someone was standing behind me. But there was absolutely nothing there. Just the trees and that thick, creeping fog. But the sound kept going, right there beside me like it was stuck to my skin. It kept going, like it was floating in the air between my ears. And Timothy. I've never seen him like that. Frozen in place, eyes wide with something like real fear. Like he could hear her, too. I grabbed his leash and ran straight back to the house. When I burst through the door, my grandma was already standing by the window, staring out like she knew exactly what we'd seen. I asked her what the hell that was. She didn't answer right away. Just said she's seen her before, heard the murmuring at night. Sometimes it calls to her too, but she never answers. And right then, everything I used to laugh off, everything my mom warned me about felt real in a way that made me sick to my stomach. I don't know what I saw. I don't even want to guess. But I know it wasn't just some lost person in the woods. It was something else. I'm still here, but I don't leave the house after dark anymore. Hell, I don't even go near the windows when the sun starts going down. Sometimes my curiosity gets the best of me, and I peek out, just to see if she's back. But so far, nothing. The worst part is not knowing and not having a reason. Not being able to explain what I saw. I can't tell anyone about this. My mom would lose her mind. She knows what goes on in these woods. And as much as I've wanted to tell my friends, none of them would ever take me seriously. They've never been out here. Some of them probably haven't even set foot anywhere near a forest. What happened in those woods still feels like a fracture in my memory. Something too strange, too disturbing to fully understand. It all started as a simple trip. The three of us, me, Carl, and Mason, had always talked about exploring different parts of the Appalachian range. And over the years, we'd spent time in various corners of it. We'd hiked parts of the Smokies before, camped along remote trails in North Carolina, even stayed overnight near Clingman's Dome once. But none of us had ever been to West Virginia. That summer, we decided it was finally time. It was early July. We had a stretch of time off, and the plan was straightforward. Drive up, hike into a backcountry zone we'd researched near the Monongahela National Forest, set up camp by the second day, and spend 3 nights out there. It wasn't meant to be anything too intense, just a few friends escaping work, phones, and the weight of routine for a while. The first day went off without a hitch. The drive-in was long, winding through back roads that narrowed the deeper we got into the mountains. At one point, we lost service entirely and wouldn't get it back again for the rest of the trip. That was fine by us. It was half the point after all. The woods out there felt different though. It's like they're even more remote than other places. Not that the Smokies aren't already way out there, because they are. But West Virginia just hits different. It's a whole other kind of isolated. The kind of place that makes you speak a little softer without even realizing it. By late afternoon, we had made it several miles into the forest and found a solid spot, a flat clearing between 2 ridges, just far enough from any trail or marked path to be quiet and private, but not so far that we couldn't make it back if we needed to. We cooked dinner, lit a small fire, and sat under the trees, listening to the wind move through the branches overhead. That first night was calm and uneventful. I remember thinking how still everything was, how quiet the forest became after dark. It wasn't until the second night that everything began to fall apart. We'd spent most of that second day hiking around, mapping the terrain, and even stumbled across an old stone foundation deep in the brush. Just a few moss-covered remains of some forgotten homestead. That night, after another quiet meal, we were sitting around the fire when it happened. It was close to 10 p.m., maybe a little later, when we saw them. 2 girls, stumbling through the trees toward our camp. They looked terrified. Their clothes were torn. covered in dirt and pine needles. One of them was barefoot. The other kept looking behind her like she expected something to come crawling out of the woods at any second. They were talking over each other so fast I could barely make out anything, except for the fact that they kept saying they were being followed. Their panic was too raw to fake. It crossed my mind for a second that it might be a setup, some kind of trick, but it didn't feel that way. Their eyes were wide, unfocused, like they hadn't slept in days. One of them was shaking so badly she could barely stand still. Eventually, we pieced together that they'd been out there for at least 2 nights, possibly longer, and claimed they were being chased by a group of people. They didn't know who they were or why they were after them. They hadn't seen them up close, just heard them moving through the trees, always behind, always out of sight, never letting up. None of it made sense, but the fear in their voices, what little they managed to say, was enough to make us hesitate before questioning anything too hard. We looked at each other and all 3 of us understood without saying a single word. We didn't know if we actually believed their story about being followed. Chances were they were probably on something. But whatever the case, they clearly believed it, and they definitely needed help. We had 2 tents, and without much discussion, we gave them one for the night. Mason and I would share the other. Carl offered to stay up and keep watch for the first shift. We figured it was the least we could do. The girls needed rest, and we had to make sure that if any of what they said was actually real, whatever it was didn't end up following them into our camp. Around 4 a.m., it was my turn to keep watch. Carl woke me up quietly, said nothing had happened but that he was getting a weird feeling. I nodded, got out of the tent, and sat by the fire, still glowing faintly. The forest was darker than it had been the night before, like the clouds had thickened above us. I've never really believed in omens or anything like that, but if I did, that would have been a damn clear one. Then I heard it. 2 sharp cracks, not far off. Branches snapping under weight. I stood up immediately. At first, I couldn't see anything. But then, in the direction of the sound, just beyond the clearing, I spotted movement, shapes, and shadows. 3 figures, maybe more, standing just beyond the edge of our campsite, barely lit by the low flicker of the fire. I didn't hesitate. I called for Carl and Mason, loudly but not yelling. They were up within seconds, stepping out of the tent groggy but alert. The 2 girls emerged too. They hadn't slept either, still locked in that same wide-eyed fear. One of them was clutching her knees, almost rocking. Carl grabbed his bag and pulled out his sidearm. He always brought one on these trips. He shouted he'd use it if he had to. But still, the figures didn't move. They just stood there, half shrouded in the trees, watching us. Then we heard something else. A second noise. This time from the opposite direction. I turned and saw at least one more person approaching. Crouched low, moving between trees like they knew the forest better than we did. And just like that, it clicked. We were surrounded. Carl snapped and fired a warning shot into the air. The blast echoed through the trees, but the men didn't flinch. They didn't run. They didn't move at all. They just kept standing there. It was like they truly believed that the shot was just a bluff. And then it hit me. Maybe this had happened with other people before. And that thought froze me to my core. I turned to the girl closest to me and asked her what the hell they wanted. She just shook her head and said she didn't know. But she kept repeating that they were strange, dirty, silent, and unnatural. She said they didn't talk, that they didn't act like normal people, that they moved like they'd never lived outside these woods. I had heard the rumors before. Everyone who's spent time in the Appalachians has. Stories about people gone feral, living off the land, cut off from society for generations. You grow up thinking it's just folklore, something the locals say to scare kids or keep tourists from wandering too far off the trail. But in that moment, standing there surrounded by people who didn't seem quite right, who didn't respond to threats or reason or even gunfire, I started to believe it. We stayed huddled by the fire until dawn. No one slept. We just waited, listening for every sound in the darkness, watching the tree line for any sign of movement. Eventually, when the sun started to rise, we packed everything as fast as we could and left. We didn't even eat, just gathered our gear and got the hell out of there. I tried to figure out if they were still out there. I thought they were, but I couldn't be sure. Honestly, I didn't even know if I wanted to know. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. The girls came with us, and we hiked together for hours until we reached the forest road. We flagged down a ranger who drove by around midday, and after we explained what happened, he offered to radio someone to pick us up. We never filed a report. None of us wanted to deal with the questions. The girls didn't even give their real names. I know it was pretty stupid on our part. We should have done it. But in the moment, we just didn't.